Thank you for joining. We're actually streaming live on Clear One on multiple different channels, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and here with you live. Even though it's been a very difficult couple weeks, we're grateful to be here with you. We're going to have some focus generally, at least an agenda is generally going to be around an update on what's transpired over the last couple of weeks. This is going to be technology as well as events and just general happenings. So we'll go through that. We're also going to have general questions. So you can ask any question that you want live. This will actually be on different platforms. If you're on those platforms, you need to go to a couple different URLs, which there's different organizations or bodies or agendas. They can't hear one another unless you're in the same room. One of them is going to be rippleeffect.clear.events, and that's for the Ripple Effect folks. And the other one is going to be townhall.clear.events. So you're welcome to join either one of those URLs if you have a question. Currently, we're joined by other participants, or at least hosts and co-hosts out of Utah as well as Australia. So we're grateful for their attendance and their support. This is not a support-related meeting. It is for memberships or members, and there are forward-looking topics that we may discuss, especially as it relates to, the different combinations of decentralized systems all coming together. And as we've talked about before, it's over a simple strategy of connecting access devices with decentralized storage, with a go-to-market based upon telling friends and families with Clear United, general strategic partners, and then specifically focusing on different governmental organizations that actually want decentralized systems within their ecosystem. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and provide just a general update. For those that are not aware, there is a GBA, which is a Global Blockchain Association event that's going to happen May 24th and May 25th. That is in Washington, D.C. The digital world is a key part of this, and this will actually have some interesting advancements with the United Nations. At the last event, we were able to talk directly with the CIO of the United Nations and make some alignment. Even though their agendas may be focused in different ways, there's really open minds when you talk person to person, and really trying to get understanding of what centralization is versus decentralization and the benefits of the different technologies. So it's really just trying to walk in front and center and help folks to actually understand what that is. So please either plan on getting an update to this, but know that there is a digital world presence at this event, and it'll be a large event. Let's see if I've got a list of who's going to be participating. So you can kind of see from international government bodies that are going to be there, the World Bank. By the way, we're out here in the Pacific, and we're bumping into the World Bank in many locations, whether it's having a meal next to them and you identify common traits or similarities, and then next thing you know, you start talking about particular projects. But it's very eye-opening to see the United Nations, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund's involvement in these different parts of the world. As a matter of fact, later on today, there is a International Monetary Fund event in the same city at a location next to the location that I'm at. And it just so happens that all that stuff just happened to happen, which I find very, well, if I could just unpack the last 2 weeks and just kind of explain it to you, it'd be very eye-opening is probably the best word for it. But for those of you that came last week, it's actually been the last 10 days have been a very difficult 10 days. Majority of the time, there were actually 4 full days where I didn't even unpack a bag. All I had out was toothpaste and toothbrush, and I would just try and sleep. I would just try and get through some of the difficult health stuff. I've always, my whole life, I've been massively healthy. But just recently, and I don't know if it's directly related, but I actually did 2 scuba dives, and then I went on a flight that was non-pressurized. So I hoped and I believed that it was a decompression sickness. So I went actually and spent some time in a hyperbolic chamber. And make a long story short, we had some very key meetings, and I wasn't willing to miss those meetings. So we jumped on some flights, hit the meetings, and after that, just hit a wall physically. But what's interesting is there's a lot of wait time in this part of the world, and it didn't impact the meetings, but it did impact my perspective of life and just how fragile life really is. Because I can't remember the last time, one, I went to a hospital. Two, I mean, I've never been in a hyperbolic chamber. Three, an emergency room. But my eyes have been open to developing countries, and my gratitude has been, my levels of just the Fijian people is just on a level that is just very high. These people care about the simplest things. The doctors are doing amazing things with very difficult circumstances, that they're from just having assets and infrastructure, first world type infrastructure. Because really, they're running a first world country. The quality of the land, the culture, the people. But I just commend them. I commend the folks that are here for caring. So anyhow, physically, it's been a difficult 10 days or so. So appreciate everybody's flexibility there, and even prayers. But there's been a lot of advancements. One of the meetings that we had this last week was with the Reserve Bank, and I'm not going to be as specific with some of the countries. So you'll need to just kind of work with me as we go through the different digital world, these nations. You're going to see this interface here is different. You're going to see a lot of the different nations just kind of blur together for a while. I'm not going to be specific on where we are, where we're going next, who we're meeting with, primarily because there are folks that don't want us here. And it's become very evident. And I'm just going to say, I've already mentioned the organization's name with some of the prior. So for instance, I just told you about a GBA event. I'll go back to it. These are some of the folks that are participating. I will not spell out the specifics, but you can read between the lines. These folks do not want decentralized architectures within their ecosystem, even though this particular event has some folks that are involved, and the actual teams that, for instance, this event is in Washington, D.C., and the event that we're having here, a lot of the leadership is actually from Washington, D.C. So it's been very interesting to see how others are also forming within the Pacific as we have. So there's about 165 million square kilometers of ocean, and about 16 to 17 different governments and bodies, depending on if it's recognized or not. But ultimately, we're here to allow choice of decentralized or not decentralized systems. And for the different governing bodies that we've had the opportunity to meet with, again, over on this ecosystem here, so far, it's been unanimous. There's not been one that says we do not want to do anything that's associated with decentralization. I wouldn't say it's been welcomed with open arms, because that's not the case. It's been very difficult to turn on lights, primarily because those of you that have followed me for years, there's a lot of depth to this. There's a lot of layers. There's a lot of details to it. And it's not a simple topic, but it should be. It really should be. I mean, if you say, hey, here's a system, you don't need username and passwords anymore. You don't have to worry about getting violated anymore. The data is yours. The trades are in real time. They don't cost anything. There's no government, no bank in the middle of it, and it can be guaranteed cryptographically. People, people then start saying, well, yeah, there is actually something there. I think we should pay attention to this. But then when it comes time to actually start saying we're going to do this as a country, we're going to adopt this, then you start getting other folks that are kind of pointing fingers in a different way that says, well, this is going to change life. This is going to change our systems. This is going to be different. This is going to maybe give an opponent, someone that's a political, for instance, I have been, one of the first times ever in my life, I have been labeled and related to things like swastikas or hate, or, I mean, it's been just eye-opening to see not just what's going on physically, and I don't know, I don't think there's any triangulation there, but we'll see. But politically charged negative energy, and for those that think that I'm involved in politics, I have never been involved in politics in any way, and I will never be involved in politics in any way as long as I have a choice. I don't choose it. Some people may say, well, you're dealing with different countries. Why do you think you're not involved in politics? It's not a matter of running to do something, the systems. It's a matter of creating an environment where governments can operate and members and citizens can actually say, this is what I want. And those governments can either, listen to them or not. But right now, for instance, I have a dear friend that ran for Prime Minister of New Zealand. And when you dig into different elections and who runs them and how are they balanced and how are they guaranteed, there's a lot of gray area. And that's the beauty of when we talk about decentralized systems that are cryptographically guaranteed. That's where technology can come in and actually make a difference for humanity, where you can actually mathematically guarantee. So again, for those that are still coming in, they say crypto, all crypto is some fraudulent ecosystem, and they bring up the words FTX and they bring up, and to be honest with you, I actually agree with that. Crypto in general is a bunch of ignorance, gambling, speculation-based folks that don't really add a lot of value in society and don't understand what they're talking about in most cases. And they're actually not using what crypto, short for cryptography, really stands for, and that is math. Mathematically, through physics, guaranteeing that something actually occurred. That is what cryptography is. And again, Bitcoin in 2009, 2008 was not the first time, even though Bitcoin is a very great example of a litmus test of how cryptography can be used. It was not the first time. There was a gentleman mentioned inside the Bitcoin white paper 5 different times. His name is Scott. I'll leave it at that. You can go do your own research. And he, in literally way earlier, based upon a genealogy, so proving that something happened in a certain space of time, he actually started that a lot longer, a lot earlier. Wonderful man too. He was also at this other event here. So when we talk about these events that are coming up, a lot of wonderful people, not just governing bodies or non-governmental bodies or national bodies or private sector companies are going to be there, but many, many, many different individuals from all around the world that make a lot of difference. So again, that's kind of a long-term thing. Short-term thing, today at 6 o'clock, the International Monetary Fund kicks off an event. When I say 6 o'clock, my time local, it's still noon. So in about 6 hours, this event will kick off. I'll let you know how it goes from one perspective or another. But the goal is to really not fight. That's not what this is about. It's to understand, it's to gain alignment for the betterment of humanity and for the betterment of generations. And it's very interesting how all of this is triangulating in this part of the world. You can kind of see other parts of the world, there'll be different phases, but it's very interesting to see, because I was recouping in one part where all the governmental buildings are, different ministries, different departments, different banks, and just needed a break. And so, I'll make a long story short, I ended up at a location, and it just so happens within 24 hours was notified that this big event's happening right next door to where I'm at, which, as you know, a lot of things like that always continually happen, but it's been very eye-opening. So I'm going to stop blabbing. You know that there's always things that I can provide feedback on, but that's kind of the general updates. From a technology standpoint, the biggest advancements have been within the actual systems around the digital marriage and digital dispute topics are the current active areas of development. If you want me to, I can dig into any of those. But before we do that, I'm just going to open it up to general questions. Remember that the questions can be heard with the general audience, but it cannot be heard from meeting room to meeting room. So I'll go ahead and just open it up for questions since we're straight up at 12. If you've got thoughts, feedback, questions, or areas
Hey,
you'd
Mark,
like me to focus on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, gotcha.
Hi, how are you?
Really good. It's good to hear your voice.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that you were sick, and unfortunately, at some point you may play them. But I do have a quick question in regards to the developers, the SDK kits. I actually have some people who are interested in knowing more about that. What can I tell them about that part of the digital world?
That's a really good question. There's some groups that we have. That's probably a really good way to get them initially engaged, whether it's knowing
I thought so.
So there's some online groups. They're all found within ClearSignal.
Okay.
So ClearSignal. So for those that didn't hear the question was around developers and how developers could get involved. So ClearSignal has groups. If you search them for digital world developers, or there's one particularly that's called Core Team. Core Team is where a majority of the development and code and linkages are. Otherwise, this is really the best area to find documentation or the software developer kits or code resources, and this will continue to mature over time. So that's basically that, if that makes sense.
Okay, I'll look for that. I'll look for that group on Signal. Thank you.
You're very welcome. One other thing that happened, if there's no other questions, I'll jump into the next topic of this last week. We have an amazing university out of Australia. I won't be specific, but these guys are world renowned, one of the top 3 in the world for research that is starting to dig into the technology built within the digital world and the code underneath it. The analysis initially, I wouldn't say was accurate, but when they started digging in and really understanding, they really are getting the concepts, they're getting the value. This is not just a binary replacement for Red Hat Enterprise Linux on the back end. So when we look at this slide right here, basically you've got servers with storage that has an operating system from ClearCenter called ClearOS Server. And that is a binary replacement for Red Hat Enterprise Linux. It's not just about that. Then from the front end side of it, you've got new phones. Some people call them Freedom phones, Armor phone, Clear phones. There's different models. There's different versions. There'll continue to be beautiful things that are happening there. But it's not just about the software that runs these phones, ClearOS Mobile, because that's just a replacement for Android, and it has the ability to replace Google or not. And then underlying all of this, or underneath this, is basically a blockchain framework that is a version that is past Stellar, and it's past Ripple. So it goes from Ripple to Stellar to the digital world. And a lot of folks don't understand. Let's see if I can find, I'm not going to do that one. Let's see if I can find an example. So here's a quick summary of what the findings are, at least from our perspective, where they're currently looking. So what you end up with is, on one hand, and I don't know if I can share this. I think I can. So on one hand, you end up with a permissioned blockchain, then permissionless blockchain, then non-blockchain based solutions. So those are kind of the categories. And then you've got different kind of functions, controls, performance, and costs. So this is how the analysis, the overarching analysis and review is taking place. But there's much more depth to this than just these different pieces that I've just discussed, from an operating system on the mobile side, operating system on the server side, and then operating system on what we would call a cryptographic decentralized operating ecosystem. But the combination of all of this with a layer over it of key management. So how does the individual actually link their fingerprints and 12 words to then have derived keys for everything they do within an ecosystem? That is what people are starting to figure out is really what makes the digital world unique, on how passwords can go away, but someone can prove who they are cryptographically, better, more securely than you currently can in the centralized ecosystems where system profiles us and then says, oh, let me see if I can look you up. This is your date of birth. This is your mailing address. This is your name. Let me validate this zip code. Okay, we have you validated. Because that's really not a validation. There's nothing, anybody can grab that data. Anybody can change a voice. Anybody can make things up. Anybody can call a number. Anybody can send an email. But to be able to cryptographically guarantee things, which is basically saying 5-factor authentication, something you do, something you are, certain space and time, and something that's actually happening within a system that is actually being tracked and traced and verified, and everyone can see it in real time. That is what is defensible. That is what is unique. And that is where innovation and technology can help humanity really for the future. So this review is a massive, important review. We'll go ahead and, in the right time, in the right place, we'll discuss that. It's not the right time and the right place right now, but we look forward to reviewing that with the world and with others. We'll go ahead and take other questions if you have them. Any thoughts, any feedback? Know that I appreciate everyone's prayers and consideration and involvement. I'll go ahead and jump to another topic if there's no questions right now. This last week, one other thing that's happened is based around ClearOS server and a roadmap for this. So I'm going to pull up a website. Go to ClearOS, not .apps, because that goes to the mobile environment, but .com. This will go to the server environment. And inside of the server environment, there's people helping people under the forums, the community forums. There's people having questions with this driver or that or this. So this week, again, 5 days ago here, you can see there's actual active development that's going on in a post that went up around specific continuation of development on the ClearOS server portal as it particularly relates to web domains or digital locations. So there's going to be continued involvement there from Ben, Peter, and Daryl These are some of the original folks that helped to build what's known as ClearOS Server. Back in those days, it was called Clark Connect. Wonderful team, amazing team out of Canada. Have the utmost respect for these individuals. I met them in 2005. They started a lot of this stuff in 2000, probably 2001, 2002. And they've done just an amazing job. But some of the big news here is not just the ClearOS Server portal continuation, but the ClearOS Server development will end up leapfrogging some of the existing ClearOS 7 version. So the server, and don't get ClearOS Mobile and ClearOS Server confused, but the actual major releases, so that's a 7.x, 6, so 5, 6, 7, 8, those are major releases. Minor releases are like 7.1, 7.2, 7.3. So leapfrogging over .8 major release completely. Why? Because Red Hat Enterprise Linux, for those that don't understand kind of the history around open source architecture, again, open source is living the law of consecration, software development, where no one owns it or controls it, but everybody can benefit and basically develop on it if they so choose. I look forward to feeling better. But anyways, where you basically take what they call Fedora, then it turns into Red Hat, then it turns into CentOS. You may have heard those terms, but IBM bought all of it. So the development primarily from Red Hat, which will then bleed into CentOS and Fedora. So they don't own the ecosystems of Fedora and CentOS because really the world owns it. Some of the folks behind it really understand open source, open architecture, and really the future of development. But IBM for $34 billion in cash, they were literally able to stop the CentOS future. And what you're seeing here is there will be multiple different organizations, from Cloud Linux Foundation to the Alma Linux Foundation to the Clear Linux, or what we call Clear Foundation, all of them coming together along with many other sponsors to basically work together on this new ClearOS Server 9 architecture. So it's a pretty material conversation. If you're not a developer, it's not a big deal, but this is actually what runs the back-end architecture. When we look at this slide here, this is what runs the operating system that actually creates the decentralized apps. Now, you don't have to do it on this platform. It runs on anything from Ubuntu to normal flavors. It won't run on Windows. That's one of the reasons Windows is kind of converting into the Linux ecosystem. But it will basically build on any kind of version of Linux that's x86 and certain flavors that are ARM-based. So what that means is you've got an expensive server or you've got an inexpensive server. These nodes can be brought up to be storage nodes or just general nodes. So basically has the architecture that creates a framework that never goes down. And when I say never, that's a pretty tall order to have something that doesn't go offline. For instance, the current systems in the financial system, well, let's say stock market system, those can go offline every night after 5 Eastern Standard Time or every weekend. The banking systems, I'm sure you've seen times when your banking system has gone offline. Now, don't get confused with a website or a database, or there are systems that also run underneath those independent banks and organizations, such as SWIFT systems, wire systems, ACH systems. There's different kind of clearinghouse systems. The federal wire system, when you go and do some research there, for instance, I personally met with Senator Bennett, who used to be over the finance committees he was the majority whip within the US. He's now passed away, but he said, Mike, we don't need to worry about planes running into buildings, which he's talking about 9/11 and the repercussions that came from there. What we need to worry about is basically the financial system. He talks about the federal wire going off, for just 24 hours, so people can't actually transact. He talks about economic collapse as a byproduct of that. And that's one of the things that decentralized systems absolutely just stops the threat of. When you've got a server computing architecture, and it doesn't have to be one operating system, it can work on any operating system, like any operating system. I shouldn't say that because a lot of people here are like saying, well, can I run on my Windows 98 version? And I'm talking about server architecture systems. So anyways, I know my energy is low today. I don't feel good at all, but I did want to log on and just communicate with everyone the different things that are moving. And there's still a lot of things moving, even though I'm not. I mean, there was literally there were 3 or 4 days I didn't even unpack my computer and turn it on at all. But it's neat to see the continued work and the continued teams and the heart behind this effort just continue to move forward. So thank you for your time and for your involvement. I'll go ahead and open up one more time. If people have questions or feedback before we close, you're welcome to ask it now. If not, we'll plan on seeing you in a week. So thoughts, feedback?
Hey, Michael, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Can hear you great.
Hi, kia ora, kia ora. So I have a family member who has watched a couple of your videos, and he's based in the Cook Islands, and he was interested in trying to connect with you. So I guess my question is, what's the best way, or are you speaking with anyone in the Cook Islands? What's your plans on heading over there, or? Yeah.
First off, for those that didn't hear this question came from, or is around the Cook Islands. So I'll go ahead and address it now. First off, I'll say kia ora. I'm actually in an environment where that's not the normal greeting, but I find myself greeting everyone with that. I have connected with the Honorable Prime Minister Mark Brown many times there in the Cook Islands, Rarotonga, Atutaki area. I've had online meetings just like this 2 or 3 times over the last 2 years, personally, one-on-one. Well, there was other people in the meeting, but was really connected, and he really understands and gets decentralization, and I really believe his heart is in the right place. I did send 3 different emails to meet with him. I personally sent these within the last 90 days, and because I plan on going to islands all around him, and I've really felt from day one the Cook Islands is really one, they understand decentralization. 2, they understand asset protection. 3, COVID has hit them. 4, travel has been impacted. So this is perfect for them. And his chief of staff replied with a rejection. We're not willing to meet with you. We're doing everything you're doing with other people. It was basically the response. I won't mention names, but it was disheartening because I really believe that Mark needs to see this real time, and I'm willing to go and teach him real time. I have invited him to Utah, all expenses paid, to one of the forum events that we did 2-3 years ago. And I know he's got a lot of moving parts right now. And I really believe that from an economic standpoint, what this is doing, particularly when I say this, I'm going to pull open a site here. I'm going to come into services, and I'm going to go down to asset management. So that's another thing that we accomplished here in Fiji this last week, is we actually incorporated an asset-based company We stood up a team, and we are working through the existing systems around taxations and business creation. And then, well, I'll come back to that because it's massive. I don't even want to mention it because I don't even want to thwart it. But back to your question, because it's really important. Cook Islands needs to be in the middle of this. We will be in places all around them, at least close as you can get to them. And we don't have an invitation letter to come to the Cook Islands. If we had one, we would go. It's imperative that we meet physically. Mark Brown did attend, along with Mr. Simon Kofi, the Pacific Forum that was here in Fiji. He attended virtually or remotely, but he was one of the keynote speakers. And I just know that Mark would absolutely resonate with this. I know that his involvement would be turnkey, wouldn't even be a question. But for whatever reason around him, the gatekeepers are basically blocking it. What I will do is I will send off another message, and I'll also give you my email. Here, I'll just type it out here. So anyone can basically, they're watching this as a stream, and you can see it in the URL here. So mproper@clearcenter.com. You can send me anything that you would like there. I respond unless I'm trying to get better. But anyhow, so mproper@clearcenter.com. Send any invitations or any kind of dialogue, and I will ensure that we connect up and a meeting happens within the Cook Islands. Currently, I have travel that doesn't include the Cook Islands, but we tried. Like I said, about 90 days ago, we started the process of engagement. So, but now's the time to engage there. So we thought they would be one of the first.
Thank you so much, Michael. I'll make sure he reaches out to you.
Okay. And if you want me to reach out to him, feel free to provide me with his information. You know how to get in touch with me. And thank you for caring. Thank you for paying attention. Thank you for being you, for standing up for what's true and this, just even last night, let's talk about a roller coaster. Earlier in the day, we get a message from the one body that could actually block this in a massive way. They welcomed it with open arms. Not only that, but they're willing to take us in to all of the different divisions and departments and ministries and ecosystems that matter with their blessing. That is a massive feat for people to see something and to have open eyes and open ears to hear and to see. But I would say that hearts are opening, minds are opening. This isn't a very complicated thing to understand. When you talk about how do you use it, okay, I just scan a QR code and I can make a payment. Scan a QR code and I can log in. These are simple things, right? To apply that and then have the infrastructure underneath it that is not centralized is where it gets very complicated. But I promise, not just those that are listening, but future generations, that the technology and architecture within this system is built on true and correct principles. Decentralization is a true and correct principle. The ability to govern ourselves as individuals, as families, as communities, as whether you want to look at it as councils, whether you want to look at it as a tribe. These rights are very important. And what we've done over the years with colonialism, I'm not saying that colonialism is wrong. Everyone has their choice in their history. Everyone has their own knowledge and data around what history has done or hasn't done. But the future has not been written. And for organizations that are standing, even like when we're in some of these meetings, I really wonder if people are actually getting it. I wonder if it's just going in one ear and out the other. But at the end, when they ask intelligent questions or say, you know what, this sounds better than anything we've ever seen. We don't have any questions. Let's get moving forward. Knowing that there's tape. And for those in the Pacifics that already live here, like the last individual that just asked a question, this is your home. These are your people. You've watched me for years. You understand I don't come from the same environment. It's natural for me to run really fast all day long. You know, it's been hard for me to slow down here. It's been good. It's been really good for me to slow down. I really am missing my family, missing my kids, missing my wife. But it's been good to basically understand a simple way of living, seeing today for the gift that it is, especially with health, where it's been just challenged, so to speak. I've just got a real appreciation and blessing for health. And anyways, I'm going to stop blabbing unless there's more questions. Up to the Cook Islands, if you can, that would be wonderful. There's actually a gentleman there in Tarong, or in I think if I remember right, the last caller is from New Zealand, and there's a gentleman who is in the hospital in Auckland. He's in the main Auckland hospital. He's actually got a clear phone that's shipping out to him now, but he's a very solid Bitcoin purist, and he's opening doors within some key islands such as Tonga and Samoa. And I'm learning real fast that these islands, they didn't give in to colonialism. They're still sovereign. I didn't even understand that. They understand why we're here and where we're going. They understand who controls this and the creator. So this has been a massive learning experience for me, both spiritually and physically. Not just on now, it's coming up on 4 months, but it's been very eye-opening. I want to calmly close with a statement that I am of sound mind and I would never take my life. But I do feel threatened. But I also feel the strength of many. And I appreciate you joining in. And we will let you have a wonderful week, and we'll plan on seeing you at the same time next week. So we'll let you go. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.